the Uganda Diaspora Show on Civic Space TV. My name is Isaac Wagala and I am your host. I'll be sitting in for the regular host, Lynn Komjisha, and today the topic of discussion is the role of the international community in ensuring free, fair elections and human rights in Uganda. Now, for context, as you may all know, in exactly 40 days, Ugandans will be heading to the polls to determine their next president. This race has attracted 8 contenders, but that is not all. It has also been particularly marked for the violent conduct of the security forces, arbitrary arrests and detention of opposition supporters, and of course this has drawn a lot of condemnation, especially from the international community, but also the local political observers in the country. This constitutes the basis of our discussion, and I now have the honor and the pleasure to introduce to you my esteemed guests who are joining us from the North America, that is the USA and Canada. Let me start with Mr. Francis Komhanda, who is in the States and is the lead of the Alliance for National Transformation chapter. It's a pleasure to have you, Francis. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, Kwagala, and my fellow panelists, Dr. Chen, and our viewers. It's always good and exciting having a discussion about our country and how we can bring in some reforms that are meaningful for everyone. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed. And of course, we have Dr. Ochen Alfred, who is a diaspora leader in Canada, specifically in the British Columbia province. It's a pleasure to have you, Alfred. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. I'm Alfred Okoto Chen. I'm calling in from BC, Canada. It's my pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for hosting us. I look forward to brainstorming on this fascinating subject. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed. And let me start with you, Alfred,
yes,
by asking you to give us your impressions of the conduct of the presidential election campaign so far, before we delve into the issue of the human rights observance and the role of the international community in ensuring that we have a free and fair election. What have been your key takeaways from the electoral process so far?
Thank you very much. I think since the inception of the campaigns, I've been following, and I must say that I also kind of remotely attended the debates on the presidential debate, and I must say, to a large degree, it was very informative and insightful. Though it was more of an academic, process, but I must say that in average, most of the candidates, brought on very insightful, programs and policies. I was very fascinated by General Amuntu's submissions on tourism. I think, he kind of professed and articulated pretty well. And also I was very impressed too with FDC candidate, Mafabi. It comes to the finance, the economy, how to place, money in the pocket. I think it was very good. And also, I must say, Honorable Chakulanyi too, in terms of the human rights and political justice, equally made very, impactful, presentation. And I also kind of fascinated by the submissions by the CP candidate, presidential candidate, about federalism. It might have not been very coherent, but it had very, informative concepts about federation and how Ugandans could salvage themselves, from the current decentralization or centralized systems of administration. Then on the campaign trail too, I've been following, and I must say that initially I had thought that the electoral process would be, calm, mellow, and peaceful, but I knew that as we advance towards the finishing, lane time, the interests and passions, would get exacerbated. Hence, the members become a little bit jealousy with their supporters too, becoming heavy-handed. And I've seen this, taking place. I think the members of opposition, especially NUP, NOPE, have been a little bit disadvantaged. I think they have been unfairly treated to some degree. I watch, like in Uganda, what happened around that place. I'm also watching in my own home region of northern Uganda. I saw, like in Noya, the NOPE presidential candidate, Bobby Wine, was blocked from actually, freely, engaging, interacting, and marketing his programs to the voters. I saw him trying to, to advance toward Alego, that's towards the southern Sudan border. It was blocked. I saw multiple police officers with heavy, armaments, and I like the way he approached it. He began to sing instead. He sang to the soldiers, to the police officers, how they're suffering, how he could salvage them. So I think it was very creative there, despite, the political traumatizing approach by the police of Uganda. He kind of twisted it in a more, in a more easy and friendly way. Even the police officers stood watching and they could listen to the messages he was trying to relay. So I think it was very creative. They say that you can change, if you have lemon, you can make it, lemon drink. Or you have an orange, you can make some, orange juice. So it was very creative to that regard. I think he managed the situation well, but I must say that I feel very concerned that the Uganda electoral processes and infrastructures are completely compromised and and downgraded to the extent that they are not anymore authentic, ethical, and impartial when they're trying to conduct their institutional and constitutional duties. I would expect Uganda police to provide security and safety to all the candidates, irrespective of the camps they come from. They would allow every candidate to relay, market their policies and programs to the potential voters, as opposed to suffocating their rights and opportunities, to market their philosophies to the voters. So I think that's a little bit a setback in this electoral process. And secondly, too, I must say also I'm not very impressed with, I'm concerned actually with the electoral commission itself. I think they tried to implement their policies differently. For example, they say there is no procession for the candidates. But I see the ruling party, candidates, the supporters easily, make processions like in Western Uganda. I saw in Barara, in Chigezi, they were marching, in huge numbers in other parts of the country. If, especially the other members of the opposition, in particular, the NUP does that, that would be, kind of approach with heavy, handedness, which is not a balanced kind of approach. I think the EC is a backing dog, doesn't have the teeth to bite, that doesn't have. It's just as more of an spectator in the process. They can only talk to other candidates while the big fish in the house is untouched. So the grounds are unlevel, imbalanced, not fair. Yeah. And I've maintained from this forum before that the results of the elections are already predetermined because of the unfairness, the heavy-handedness. The other candidates are not campaigning freely, so you don't expect others to, to excel in such a process. But it's good to it's good for emotional and psychological therapy, for the activists in Uganda and politicians to take part. But otherwise, I don't see anything coming out of this process. The results are sealed. From the top, no competition. Bottom, there's competition. Thank you.
Thank you. That's quite a damning verdict. But let us hear from Francis what he has got to say about it. Francis, what are your key observations or takeaways of the conduct of the electoral process so far?
Thank you, Kwagala and Dr. Chen, once again for us to have this conversation. The question that you've asked me, I would best summarize it by a famous quote from Abraham Lincoln. And I would prefer to read. He once said that ballots are the rightful and peaceful successors of bullets, and that when ballots have fairly and constitutionally decided, there can be no successful appeal. Back to the bullets, that there can be no successful appeal except to ballots themselves at succeeding election. Now, if we internalize that quote itself, for the case of Uganda, it speaks volume. If we go into the history of elections, and in particular, I want to pick out the 1980 elections and the Bush War. And then now we come to the elections during Museveni's regime. He claimed in 1980, the reason why he went to the Bush, that elections were rigged, they had malpractice, violence, corruption, many. By the way, if you have ever heard in Western Uganda, I think the man was called Muhindo. That man was abducted and he disappeared. So, having said that, then we come to Uganda itself. I'm glad Dr. Chen has talked about the Electoral Commission, the incompetent Electoral Commission, because that is what is supposed to guarantee the electoral process to go on smoothly. But as we have seen, it is incompetent to the extent that even they themselves, the electoral officials in the Electoral Commission, cannot manage themselves. Therefore, it will be dangerous to entrust them with managing an election for a whole country. Now, having said that, we come back. Why is it that we always go repeating over and over the same things, expecting different results? We have seen our elections being marred with violence. We saw it in 1991. We saw it in 2016. We saw it in 2021, and so on. This election had started very well, but again, for the NRM as the mastermind behind all sorts of violence, then they say, no, we are losing out. An election without violence, we can't win it. You saw how they rekindled. You have seen in all these other by elections. And violence is an act of cowardice, where you are fearing the unknown. And yet this would be an opportunity for people to articulate and sell their manifestos, present them to the electorate, to tell them what they are going to do. But to me, that is tied into the lack of freedom of speech. The constant, because the movement to keep people in ignorance is intentional. That the moment you have a very good number of people who are ignorant of something, then it is easy for you to manipulate them. That's why you find that even when it comes to civic education, on what is the responsibility of a citizen in as far as election is concerned, nothing will appear. It is the non-governmental or the civic organizations that try to do that, but quite often we have seen where they are blackmailed. Oh, those ones are agents of colonialists. Those ones are working for foreign forces and so on. And yet a voter is supposed, or a citizen is supposed to be enlightened. That's why you find most of our people in the rural areas, for example, even in the urban centers, people will just keep moving. But if you ask them, what are their rights? Do they know the Constitution? What are the do's and don'ts? In most cases, we don't have them. So that becomes a challenge. Then corruption is one of the main achievements of the NRM, by the way, because it has transcended each and every corner. When you look at corruption in elections, number one, personation. Museveni is the state and the state is himself. He's the one who will order the Abakama what to do. You find some of the electoral officers that we are supposed to use, who are supposed to be neutral, but they are agents of the ruling government. So how can they deliver a free and fair election that is non-partisan? Then you find voter bribery. That one, the NRM does it openly. You have seen it. If they don't give you a T-shirt, at least they will buy you rice. You have seen it. You saw it on primaries of NRM. You have seen it on most of these rallies and so on and so forth. So not until we look and check out such a practices would be smartly addressed, as I have always said, going nowhere. Then we have misinformation. The Museveni himself will campaign on misinformation. You've seen where people say, Museveni has given us power. Museveni has constructed for us a road. Really? In this 21st century? That shows how ignorant most people are in as far as what is government. What is the difference between what Museveni does as a person and what our government is, generally our taxes are supposed to do? So people try to isolate themselves to be part and partial of the developments that my taxes have led to the construction of road. But now it becomes Museveni. And that's why you see his son, even institutions that are supposed to be for the government, they say, my army, my boys, and then you find at everything, at the helm of everything, we are more or less reduced to Uganda to a home of Museveni, his family, and his friends that they have to discuss. Those friends who are privileged to have the scrambles that drop off the table. So, and what does this speak to? It speaks to We have failed to control rigging of elections, ballot stuffing. I know somebody will argue that, oh, now they have brought biometric machines that will read that a ballot paper is valid. But when we talk of ballot stuffing, we have seen where the army have been involved. They come on a polling station, they get the real ballot papers that are okay and begin ticking. Meaning that if they pass it through a machine, it will read it that it is the valid ballot paper. But even if I may ask anyways, when they talk of these machines, we once used them and they did not work. Now they have procured them swiftly with no comprehensive training. How am I sure that this time they are going to work? With a procurement process that was a scam and so on. Then they are saying they can work offline. They are saying now everything is confusing, and all this is a precondition for electoral violence. Then when you put now our vulnerable youth, it becomes terrible that youth are targeted, both in terms of this voter bribery and also in terms of netting violence on the youth. Because the youth, it is their time to exercise their right, it is their time to participate, but you suffocate them. You don't give them the right to be able to discern and choose whom they want. So it is important, therefore, that at least like the civic space TV can come out because of limited civic space, then educate the masses on what their rights are. But remember, you are also limited as civic space or civic organizations. For example, how many people deep in my village can listen to this program? Now that pushes us to infrastructure, where you find no even good speed internet cable was laid the country over. It was a fake one. There is no subsidized cost when it comes to data and internet. You had recently the youth talking about the Facebook and what the Communication Commission was responding. So you find all this basic infrastructure, one builds on another. You find it is also lacking. So it becomes very hard that we can have a free and fair election. You remember after 2016, the court ruling that there should be electoral reforms. Up to now, none has appeared. Norbert Mao has been used and promising heaven on earth in as far as elections are concerned, but only to realize that he's also consumed within the same fire that is consuming every other development-related aspect in Uganda. So it is a quite challenge, and I do have hope that every other election that comes, there is a certain percentage of Ugandans that get enlightened on what we need to do. That is my hope. And I would not say that people should not participate, but people should participate consciously. We should always pick lessons from the past elections, and then we say, okay, as a people, because now it is we Ugandans to salvage ourselves from this bondage. So we need to always pick lessons, and then we come and apply. So that every percentage that we add, one at a time, maybe at point X. You know, John Omuntu has always said that time is a healing factor. We do agree that the NRM for now, they have the watch. But us who don't believe in most of the things that they do, we should believe we have the time. Time will come. Time will tell. Thank you.
Interesting insights. Well, it sounds like a very gloomy outlook you have painted. But let us now delve into the main gist of the conversation and address the issue of the role of the international community in ensuring that we have a free, fair, and credible election that also observes the human rights of the citizens, in the country. And recently, the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights has come out strongly in a statement to condemn the Ugandan government for its violation of human rights during this electoral period, specifically by pointing out the increasing levels of political repression targeting the opposition, political figures, and the media. So I want to ask you, Dr. Alfred, how much of an adverse impact does this bring about for the standing, our diplomatic and reputational standing in the international community of nations? What does this statement really mean for our standing in the community of states globally?
Thank you. Yeah, as you know, in the past, Uganda was shielded by the international community, whereby the likes of Bill Clinton and others would brand John Museveni and Kagame and others as the new breed of African leaders. And in the process, they did a lot of damage and a lot of human rights degradations. But because, to a large degree at that time, they were being shielded. But I think as time proceeded and evolved, many things are coming in the open. I think even the UN, made a statement about the current electoral process and its kind of credibility currently in Uganda, ongoing their concern about the way the opposition are being treated and how supporters of NUP are being treated, and that to a large degree undermines the credibility of the electoral process, and even the results will be questioned. You might win an election, but as long as the process does not appear fair, transparent, ethical, and authentic, it always create questions and doubts in the minds of other stakeholders around the world. You can see next door in Tanzania, it was very clear that despite the stiff competition from the opposition in Tanzania, the CCM would win. Yeah, they would still win. The CCM would still emerge a winner with a small maybe margin. But because of the heavy, the heavy-handedness of the ruling party, even right now, the credibility of the current government is being questioned. I mean, SADC members, some have declined to acknowledge and embrace the new, leadership. So the process is very key. So for us in Uganda, the fact that there are so many international, election observers already watching, from a distance, and they are really kind of having queries about the process, about the impartiality of the organizers, like the EC, the police that should provide security and safety to all the citizens in the country. But it seems they are kind of bending towards one side. That for sure, will erode all the world's credibility about the outcome of the upcoming elections. Hence, it will paint Uganda as a country, as a bad country, which is not good for us, even in terms of trade, tourism, and other things. So that's already
Alfred, do you feel we could end up becoming a pariah in the community of international states, because if this situation is not arrested in time, and perhaps it evolves into more adverse challenges with respect to our electoral and democratic processes, do you fear that we could be isolated in the long term?
I think if this proceeds the way it is, we are heading that way. But that kind of outcome can only emerge if the citizens of Uganda intensify their pressure on the status quo, on the ruling party. And in the process, if Ugandans place a lot of pressure, that implies that General Museveni, with its operatives, will try to retaliate to crush the opposition, and that would actually kind of amplify that process, and actually be a blessing in disguise for the opposition and civil society if they can light more fire, so that it exposed more of the darts that are there. So that will even make Uganda maybe get isolated in the long run if Uganda responds by the government by hitting hard the opposition. You assume, that means that the ICC will come in, and other international bodies will come in, and it will definitely undermine our government. But as you know very well, General Museveni might not care much about the opinions of the international community. He has navigated this successfully in the past. If you remember, almost 20 years ago, when almost half the country was in turmoil, was in war, and they were actually encamped in a very, very, nasty situation. And there's a lot of human rights abuses. But, he still lobbied and navigated through, that money path. And if you talk to people, others, I would think that the current has transformed Uganda and there's no any more war. So also the lobbyists play a role. What I know is that the NRM or NRA government, since they came to power, they've had a very good lobbying abilities and capacities, to convince international communities, even the donors and the big powers. I don't see Trump, coming on General Museveni soon, or even the French or the English. He'll go and do some negotiation with Russia and be normalized. So for us to come out from that kind of pit hole, is the Ugandan Wananchi, Hopoloi, who have to, place more pressure, come up, and in that way, we'll be able to expose, the dictatorship. Just like in Kenya, you could see, like, okay, example 2007, when the PNU tried to, suppress the ODM. It was like ODM was winning actually. They had more members of parliament. They won in most of the districts. They had more councillors and mayors countrywide, plus even MPs. But the ballot staffing at the last minute, they had to swear it back at night, okay? And they took charge. But because the Kenyans who were activists placed pressure and it was on fire, there was no doubt Bush and and others had to send international kind of diplomats to help. That's how Kofi Annan ended up there. Ramaphosa had to go there to try to have peace negotiation between the late Raila Odinga and the late Kibaki. Why? Because the local population, the citizens, had to stand up. The question is, are Ugandans ready, populace, after they've been cheated in the electoral process, to stand up and say enough is enough? And in the process, the standard cause the military dictatorship will hit hard, and that's the time when the rise will come in. But beyond that, we won't go far. But from where I sit, I don't see us, our fellow compatriots, are prepared and ready for that yet. I don't think.
Thank you for your perspective, Alfred.
Yes.
Let me return to you, Francis, and let us now make a contrast between what Alfred has discussed, because that is largely the international community or diplomatic response to the current political crisis in Uganda amid a very heated political electoral campaign. There is a deafening silence on the local diplomatic landscape. We no longer see any statements of condemnation or concern from the domestic American mission, or from the British High Commission, or even from all the other, partners, global partners of Uganda in the diplomatic community, like the Scandinavian countries. What does that, do you get the feeling that this is some sort of ominous or a sign of what is to come? Because this appears to me like a well calibrated, conscious sort of disengagement diplomatically. What is this all about? What has suddenly happened to our foreign partners that they are no longer concerned about the democratic and political trajectory of the country?
Thank you, Kwagala. I don't think the international community is withdrawn, but they are watching and thinking of what to do. When you are dealing with a regime that is dictatorial in nature, and when you want to solve a complex problem, the first step is to familiarize yourself. And in most cases, when you are familiarizing with the problem, people may think you are just quiet, or you are taking a lukewarm kind of approach, but you are trying to understand it. I will give you the example that every time, whenever the government would be held accountable at an international level, they would invoke and make an alarm. We are a sovereign country. We are a sovereign country. We are doing this. We have the right to manage our own affairs. And those are the excuses that they were giving. But right now, if you go back and say, okay, where does the international community come in? And these are the things that now we are trying to invoke and ensure that these other countries, the big brothers, should know. For example, you are aware that our democracy is founded in the UN Declaration of 1948, where it was a declaration of human rights. So it is a right for people to exercise, to be able to vote the leaders they want, and so on. The right to life, which the NRM has been taking people's lives because of just a mayor election, and they will shoot people and do all sorts of dehumanizing. Then the other one is the 1966 UN, or what we call the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. This one also underpins democracy. So you find those declarations, they give us the freedom, they give even the international community the freedom to be able to say, hey, look here, this is not right. Now, for Uganda, you find, I think we participated, but I don't know whether we ratified it. I will go ahead and find out what we call the 1997 it was International Interparliamentary Union on Universal Declaration of Democracy, which I think whether I will find out whether Uganda ratified. So when you look at all this, whether you like it or not, they bring in the international community. Now, in which Uganda, this one I'm sure they dodged, although they are signatories, but they did not ratify it because the NRM knew what they were doing. That is the UN Millennium Declaration of 2000 to promote democracy. And specifically, it was targeting leaders. But I do know Africa participated in what we call the African democracy and rule of law and human rights. And it was mostly looking at leaders. It was looking at how they conduct themselves and how they promote democracy and so on. But having said that, we find ourselves that in Uganda, these are strategic intentions of the ruling government not to open this space. That's why you will find they will keep crying of sovereignty. You are a sovereign country. But remember, Kwagala, we have gone into a global village. Issues that affect Uganda can equally affect Tanzania, can equally affect Kenya. And we have seen the ripple effect of the dictatorial tendencies of our president of Uganda, how they have had a ripple effect in Tanzania, how they had a ripple effect in Kenya, and how they have had a ripple effect in South Sudan. They all use the same playbook that was written by Museveni. In Congo, the same, and so many other different countries. In Zambia, they were using the same. You know, something that we need to accept that Museveni has lived long and has an influence in the interlacustrine region politics or geopolitics. And he's a playbook for so many other different people. Those who have had an opportunity, like Ruto, they have come to him to come and be coached on what to do, and so on and so forth. So I think it is important that as a people, we should define what is our position or which position do we want to take at the global stage so that we are not isolated. But otherwise, I must assure you, Kwagala, the international community is not keeping quiet. We are observing. That's why you find they are always constantly sending observers. You had the UK send a statement of when things don't go right back home or in Uganda. And we are the people who are in the diaspora and other people. We have always put our voice. We say, look here, this is not right. Look here, this is going to lead us into a big challenge. And I think as we come to that, like discussing what is the role of the international community, I think we can elaborate on that. But I still think that the issue of invoking sovereignty and claiming we are a sovereign country should not hold water. We are now global citizens, and Uganda should be aware that what affects or what they do will affect other people even in other areas. By the way, it even affects us where we are. Kwagala, I will give you an example that sometimes there is when you talk about Uganda, when they ask you, do you come from Uganda? You say yes. And they ask you, where do you come from? You say Uganda. And people don't know Uganda. But do you know when you talk about safe houses, when you talk about Idi Amin, when you talk about the basement, you come from that country where they torture people in the basement. But should that be what is marketing Uganda? The answer is no. So that's why we all equally get involved. And as they have always said that sometimes we don't talk good of our country. There is nothing like defending something that is indefendable. We all agree we are ambassadors of Uganda. But if we are doing things that are horrible and even other people know them, then you put us in a very complex situation of how we should begin defending evil. We also say, yes, we condemn it, this is happening. It's not that there are no good things that are happening in Uganda, but how do we better ourselves? For Uganda, instead of our leaders ensuring that we keep making ourselves better in everything and ensuring that how do we also better our democracy and participation, instead they keep suffocating. And that is what speaks volumes outside there in as far as our country is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for those reflections. Alfred, let us cross over to our southern neighbors, that is Tanzania, and reflect on the state of democracy across the wider East African region. Our election is coming against the backdrop of a disputed and bloody Tanzanian presidential election, where the incumbent who succeeded the late Magufuli has been declared with a somewhat surprising percentage of 97%. But the United States State Department has come out to indicate that it's going to commence a process of reviewing its diplomatic relations with the United Republic of Tanzania. Should this toll a bell in the minds of the Ugandan authorities ahead of the elections, that should anything go wrong, perhaps where the will of the population is not respected, or where there is gross violation of the human rights, this could also be replicated in Uganda, and it could maybe serve as some sort of sanction, so that the Ugandan authorities can reform and align themselves to the right democratic path.
Thank you. I think I had initially hinted.
Alfred, I think you have muted your mic. You may have to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you. I said initially, I think I had hinted and touched on our neighbors like Tanzania about the recent elections. As I stated that Tanzania and other East African countries are not much different. Though I think others might be more candid, in doing it, as opposed to the way they did it. I think Tanzania gave it so much kind of weight by giving almost over 90%, which is hard to believe. I think even that may be rigged, in a modest way, could have sugarcoated a little bit, and the rest of the world might have maybe, just their propaganda and lies. When you say 94, 95, that's a joke, because we know very well that even historically, the CCM has been the ruling party since independence, but have never obtained, I think, above 78 for the last 10, 15 years or 20 years. And how come now? Okay, so I think this current leadership for the CCM were extremely ambitious. Yeah, I wish they had done their homework and executed in a more politically correct way. But having said that, I'm very happy that the Tanzanians at last, are rising up. In the past, I would say the ruling party, the CCM, has been having a ball, Only once in a while in Zanzibar, there would be kind of violent elections, because as you know, the two actually are struggling to be one nation, the mainland and the island. they're struggling. So always there's that kind of bad blood between those two, territories, the mainland and the island. But and to make it more complex, the current president comes from the island, Zanzibar. So, and they don't have that kind of huge number and percentage, compared to the mainland. And also, CM also has been having a lot of internal party contradiction. Many members have left the party and joined the opposition. Some might still be in the party, but very laid back, not fully committed because of the corruption, the lack of transparency and accountability in the party. So that has kind of brought problems. So when you say that the US and other international bodies, countries, are trying to threaten to review their engagements, interactions with Tanzania, is understandable. But how far can they go? Sometimes, these international bodies and countries might threaten at the initial stages, but reaches somewhere, their interests submerge. In politics, there are no permanent enemies. Once the interests converge, things will normalize. And that's how, at the heat of the things, you might think they might be brought to their knees. But as time, elapses, you find that they make up. So with Tanzania, it's a matter of time. They will make up. I know that right now the president, when she was sworn in, the first time she addressed the parliament, she sounded very reconciliatory, okay? Saying that she was very, he sounded very apologetic about what transpired. In fact, I had asking the Attorney General to consider reviewing the files of the youngsters, the Gen Zs who have been arrested, with the notion that they should be pardoned. So that's a good, start. I've also heard from other political commentators and technocrats from Tanzania who are, urging that maybe this is a time to have some constitutional review, to review the constitution. Because in Tanzania, there's no room for election petition. When elections are announced, that's it. You cannot challenge, like in the High Court, in the Supreme Court, So it's done, it's done. So others are saying now maybe it's the time for Tanzania to consider reviewing its constitution. So, they're having very pertinent and progressive conversations. Sometimes, conflicts are good. Conflicts can be both progressive and retrogressive. Okay? When conflicts bring in transformations, efficiency, and effectiveness, then it's good conflict. That's a progressive. But when conflict becomes very destructive, then that's an issue. So for me, I find that the Tanzanian electoral conflict was a blessing in disguise. That will wake up the CCM, and it may be that will make them more light-handed in the future, so that they can consider embracing, other kind of reforms. That would be very, very good. Yeah, coming to other neighbors like Tanzania, no, Kenya. Kenya has been a long walk. As you know, from the days of Sabasaba in the early 90s, like when they had, I think the first election was 92, 93, Moi had to open up the electoral space because of the pressure of the civil society and the opposition, those of Shikuku, those of the late Shikuku, the late Raila Odinga, and others. They placed pressure on Moi and opened up the space. And that later, when Moi won the last election in 97 in the narrow percentage, just because there were fragmentation in the opposition. And then in, I think, 2000, with the Kibaki Tosha by Raila Odinga, and grow when they all formed the Rainbow Alliance. Okay, they opened the space. The MOU was very, very, you know, comprehensive and very nationalistic in nature. But in the process, again, because our politicians are selfish, the late Kibaki did not, you know, kind of adhere to the last ink about the power sharing. And that's how, what again, the Kalonzos, those of Mudavadi, and those of Malalas, the Odingas broke away and formed what? ODM. Okay, and that's where there was referendum between the bananas and what? And orange. For constitutional making. All those were reforms, okay? And then it went to 207, what transpired, 207, about the disputed elections. And that brought power sharing. Again, in 2013, when Raila lost to, I think, Uhuru and Ruto, a petition, in the court, then 2017, it was nullified. That was a big electoral, revolution in the legal, constitutional aspect of things. So, like Kenya, they've been coming along, though to a large extent, their politics is majorly based on ethno-regional, basis. That's the only kind of challenge. But otherwise, they're on the right path. Around the region, I guess the most admirable kind of country. They have gaps and challenges, but they're promising. Rwanda, there's nothing much to say. It's a one-man show, strong man. The rest of the parties are just, you get, Burundi is the same thing, This in Congo, despite, all those challenges of the country, Eastern Congo is going to the M23 and so on. But I want to say I applaud the civil society and the church in Kinshasa. They put pressure on Kabila Jr. to step down and pass to Shikedi. Okay, that was very, very, very good.
In a minute, in a minute, do you think that the current developments, especially in Tanzania, could influence the attitude and resultant approach of the Ugandan authorities in as far as the electoral process in Uganda is concerned, to the extent that the key international partners like the Americans are threatening to review their diplomatic engagement with our neighbor? Do you think it could have an effect on the attitude and the approach of the government here ahead of the polls?
It will for sure have very heavy influence. And for instance, I think it might compel or influence the Uganda authorities and its institutions to be more mindful and candid when conducting their businesses. They will try very much to be very ethical and authentic and transparent, so that they are not condemned or kind of whitewash because of their conduct. So the EC might not have that teeth to bite, but they're going to try very much to point out when things are happening, okay, so that they're not blamed. I also see His Excellency General Museveni has already also kind of given hot warning to the international journalists like BBC Larry of Kenya. Remember BBC reporter that if you come to Uganda, you see fire. So what I know that the Ugandan administration is going to tighten, its nuts on international kind of observers and monitors. Okay, they have the right to invite who to invite. So they are going to invite a lot of the AU, okay, allies, and then the South African Corporation, who are just a rubber stamp, as monitors and observers. They will just say, well, the process has some, gaps here and there, but in general, reflected the will of the people.
Thank you, Alfred,
So, and then, and from there, they will advance the Pan-Africanist argument to cover up, and of course in the US, France, and they might put pressure and make noise. But what I know, the Museveni is very, very experienced. He will later on go and smoothen the things. But what I know is that the observers and the monitors who are coming in are going to be very scrutinized to the extent that they might not allow critics to come and observe and monitor the elections. And even the press too. There's some
interesting. Thank you.
Not accepted. Yeah.
Thank you for your viewpoints.
So I can see
Francis,
both negative and positive influences. Yes. Thank you.
It's a mixed bag. Francis, let us now discuss the crucial element of accountability, both on the political front, but also on the human rights front. The Ugandan government has been notorious for lack of accountability because in the last concluded elections of 2021, we had hundreds of Ugandans perish in that exercise. Up to now, there has not been any institutional or legal accountability. The perpetrators of those heinous acts and atrocities against the population have not been brought to face justice. Then on the political front, of course, we understand the natural challenges with our electoral commission, which is only independent in name, if you like, but there have not been, real legal reforms to bring about confidence in the public that institution can conduct a free and fair, credible election. So, what can the international community do to bring about the Ugandan government to be more accountable to the citizenry with respect to the political electoral processes?
Thank you for that question. And that's what we have all been asking ourselves. How do we ensure that our government brings in accountability? I always call it accountability and justice, because the moment they give an account, then justice will prevail. But it's good that you are saying, how can the international community come in to ensure that Uganda goes the right path? I will begin by saying, what do we mean generally by the international community? The international community has, like as I have said, I can say maybe three ways how I look at it. Number one is the UN. I would say the body to which we all subscribe to as nations of this world. So it is important that constantly we can't lose hope in constantly remaining the UN to call Uganda to order. But whether people listen to UN or not, that is a conversation for another day. But that is our civic responsibility, or our responsibility as Ugandans or anybody elsewhere in the world who feels their rights are being infringed on, to keep knocking on the doors of UN. And I expect. Then number two are the government. Governments work with each other. You've heard of how Ukraine and Russia war, but now other governments are being threatened to be sanctioned and so on. Sanctioned. Then we have the multinational bodies. We can also talk about NGOs. I have talked about UN. We can talk about African Union. So all these would be instruments that we would use. But how would they make sure that Uganda is accountable? As you've said, the Electoral Commission or electoral reforms would help us if we had an independent electoral commission. But how do we ensure we have that is another conversation for us to have on what should be the attributes, what should be the characteristics of an independent or features of an independent electoral reforms. But number one, as at an international level, we would have what we call observers, observation and monitoring, so that we are able even to assess standards. We are able even to detect all the fraud and violence. So, provided we don't have that, because I told you that for Uganda, they will always say we are a sovereign country. But international observation and monitoring, but even before that, before you come to monitor, you ensure that we conform to a given standard, assessing them and ensuring that almost each and every box is checked. I think that would help us move or have a leap towards managing elections that are free and fair. I don't dispute that in other countries, like you heard of how there was almost a contestation of an election in the US of 2020. But you saw how they moved in because the Electoral Commission was independent. So one person could not stop, a group of people could not stop democracy to prevail. So I want to, at some point, to see such happen in Uganda. Number two, we have diplomacy and advocacy. But this one, Wagala, I have always said, Uganda has lost a sense of having diplomats. These are not career diplomats that we know them, but we have just people who are just appointed. I'm not underestimating any of us, but for sure, either me or you or Dr. Chen, you can't just wake up and you appoint any one of us as an ambassador. No. Sometimes we will think being an ambassador is like business as usual and so on. So these are career diplomats, and you have seen that's why we don't have them. You remember, Kwagala, how is it our embassy or consulate in was it in the Middle East was turned into a casino? So just why I excuse the person because he was just handpicked. But if you are having career diplomats, they know what to do. They know when to engage these other different governments abroad who would ensure that we are having the international community or we are engaging them and how do they come in. So we are lacking that. Then the other point that I want to make is that if we want these elections and have them free and fair and how to engage, the support from civil society and the media. But in all these countries, Dr. Chen was talking about Tanzania, where you see fraud, repression, suppression of rights, electoral commission being biased, information blockout. So the moment you block the media, which is supposed to be an eye for a country or for society, then a lot is going to happen behind the curtains, which is dirty. And by the time it comes out, and blessed is social media that have come, or the digital world, explosion of information. That's why even when the national TVs don't broadcast anything, but someone somewhere has recorded it on their phone and will push it out there. So it is important, therefore, that our governments will be able to respect and tap into the support of civil society. Because civil society are good, they can even influence dialogue. That's why I told you the career diplomats would also argue dialogue, would say this is good, we can have private dialogues, we can have this, we can have this, we can go and defend this, we know how to communicate, and then everything would move smoothly. So it is important. Then, when that fails, Wagara, you have heard, they are blaming us people in the diaspora, then imposing of sanctions kicks in. That would be like a force. But do we all need that? The answer would be no. But because we are failing to acknowledge, to agree that we can dialogue, we need to have this in place, and so on. All that comes from failure of government institutions, where, like in Uganda, we had developed very good technical kind of institutions, but they have all been killed during Museveni's regime because of this handpicking and so on. And therefore, we can't get proper channel. And that's why you find now for us as people in the diaspora and grateful thinking people, for me, Kwagala, I support the sanctions. But then we have been arguing that instead of putting the sanctions on the whole country, let's use targeted sanctions. For example, is it the head of police who failed to do his role? Is it the CDF? Is it a minister? Is it so and so? Then let the sanctions be targeting individuals. It could be travel bans. It could be you issue a warrant of arrest. It could be you freeze their assets and so on. And you try to uphold the international laws and treaties. So that's why, I'll give you an example on that. We have even helped, by the way, whenever we do petitions, some countries put sanctions on so and so. Did you know that some of them who were not embezzling, but they were looting the country at an industrial scale? They fear to invest the money outside, although it is disorganizing people by buying land and chasing them from land. But sometimes they do end up wrongly investing it in the country, but it doesn't move out of the country. So you find such a things. That's where the international community would come in to help and would bring in some kind of sanity. But I still say that the overarching point here that we need is to ensure that we bring electoral reforms. Because the problems that we have, Kwagala, always stem from leadership, and the leadership that we elect or that is purported to be elected. So not until we have proper electoral reforms and we are ushering in people who really are genuine leaders, then we would still have a big challenge because we would not have accountability and justice. That's why you find they kill at will, they imprison at will, you will not appear in court, you don't know, even when you put in a bail application, it will not be granted, and so on and so forth. And these judicial killings. But once we have that, then we will know everybody is held accountable. Gone are the days, I still remember the chairman electoral commission before Badru Chigundu. What is his name? I remember. Sorry?
Sakoboy? The first one, for 96?
Yes,
96
yeah.
one.
Yeah. I remember when there was some confusion and the hooliganism had started in some place in southwestern Uganda. He wrote to the president and all the candidates that were involved and said, if this continues, I'm going to nullify the election. And indeed it was an order. Even Museveni had to respect that. But when it came to Badru, now when it comes to Yabakama, Yabakama is like a shamba boy of Museveni, by the way.
Thank you, Francis, thank you for your assessment. Let me go to Alfred as we try to wind down the program. And I want to particularly ask, what should be the responsibility and role of the citizenry in this entire matrix? Because many a time it is convenient to, appropriate and ascribe blame to a host of stakeholders. But what should the Ugandan citizen do to ensure that they can shore up their democratic fortunes, even with the almost guaranteed help and support of the international community? But ultimately, the responsibility rests on us. What can we do better to improve?
Yeah, thank you so much. Just let me kind of backpedal a little bit. I want to say that my backpedaling is going to connect with the question you're asking. I saw my colleague Francis, brought forward very fascinating points like electoral reforms. Those are very important, and I would say actually combine electoral reforms and justice. very, very important. If you have electoral reforms, and that can be attained when the national citizens or the voters push for it, for electoral reforms. Example, we should review how our EC commissioners are picked and are composed. That board, not being handpicked by one person. They should review, and that can be pushed by what our voters, Ugandans themselves, can push for that. That we want electoral commissioners that are being appointed. They will have a say. So maybe can have maybe one religious leader. They can maybe also try to maybe place guys from the opposition and from the ruling party, just like other countries did before. Kenya did that in 1993, 97. That worked out so well. So we need to review those kind of electoral reforms we need. We need also to see ways on how to audit our votes. How transmit and audit, and how the votes can be accounted for. Also is very important. From the transmission and the tallying station to the final destination, and all those can be pushed through by the citizens ourselves. No one else can do that. And then the justice, electoral justice, is very important, whereby if we know that the elections have been tampered with, it's also again the duty of the voters and the countrymen and women, again, to make firm demands to the authorities to institute reforms. And these reforms will not come on a silver plate. It will be through lots of hard work and pain to attain these reforms. So now comes to your question: how should the citizens or the voters or the Ugandans, play their part during this electoral process? I think one, I would encourage and urge countrymen and women to be more vigilant during this process. I know that the systems at play might try to interfere by being violent, or even bribery might be in. I would say they can play with your minds, not with your stomach, but not with your head or your minds. So get the money if they give you, yeah, but you know how to vote. So they must be vigilant, and they must hold those in charge accountable. If they see any member of the electoral commission misbehaving, being unethical, they should document, even possible, get the evidence and challenge in the constitutional court. That will help in the long run. And also another way how we can also not just sit on the fence and cry is by not just expecting, prosperity and fairness to prevail without sacrifices. We must learn to sacrifice. If we see things are going out badly, I would urge countrymen and women to engage in peaceful demonstration. Point out, in that way, you're going to make those in charge chicken out to engage in malpractices if they know that people are coming out from them. So one, we need to be vigilant. We need to be proactive. Being proactive is by we taking part, challenging the status quo when they try to play with the will and the rights of the voters, of the citizens, and can be attained if there's coordination. I would urge the different players in the opposition, civil society, to join hands. Sometimes at the final lap, I would not anticipate Noob fighting FDC fighting, is it fighting CP, or that kind of thing. I would urge them to coordinate and know who's who they can share information about electoral processes. You don't need to even support each other, the candidate, but you can share information that undermines electoral integrity and fairness. If you can do that, that is okay. They can actually face the elephant by grabbing the horns, and it's doable. But they need to be coordinated and play matured politics. From where I sit right now, I see that our opposition have not played their cards well. Okay, I can go into that. I would expect that expected maybe like Noop as the leading opposition to have kind of mellowed down, reach out to other stakeholders like Mafabi, okay, and Patrick Murian, no? To some degree, they might not agree, but they have one common, factor they need to check. So if there are some parts of the country you might not wish to accept, like in Gisu, some parts of Teso, the old FDC has, and some parts of even Acholi, Olam, they have fairly, good traction. Okay, so how do you, bring those guys on board and go as a team? Like you go to Kenya as another good example. There's a lot of zoning. You find like we have Wiper is very popular in the lower eastern, of Kenya, the Kamba area there. Okay, Kalonzo. You go to Bugoma, okay, Tanzoa. You find for Kenya, Wetangula is pretty much, solid there. You go to Vihiga, there's Mudavadi there, very solid. Okay, you go to Kilifi, you have the Speaker of Parliament with his KPA party, part. So but voters would follow. So if you coordinate yourselves, even our own Ugandans with alternative voices, I call not opposition, alternative voices to the status quo, would bury their differences and aim at the bigger picture. I think that would be a very good contribution by both the leaders and the supporters.
Thank you, Alfred. Thank you indeed for those insights and also the patriotic guidance to the citizenry. I hope they can only, tune in and listen and then heed that counsel for self-liberation. Indeed, we need to make the sacrifices ultimately. Francis, as we conclude, in 2 minutes, the campaign is now headed into the home stretch, the final lap, 40 days to the polling day, the 15th of January. What should we expect, especially from your candidate, Jeno Mugisha Muntu is running? What should we look out for in the last days of the campaigning period?
Thank you, Wagala. But before I come to Jeno Muntu and what he has to offer, I would also echo and say that the citizens, we as the citizens, will have a big role to play in as far as the election, both reforms and election processes are concerned. For example, one of the main roles that we have to play is voting. We elect our representatives. And if I may use the words of Mahatma Gandhi, is often cited to have said that if there is an idiot in power, it's because those who elected him are well represented. So it is the responsibility of the citizens to know what they want and to know who can ably lead them. And it is quite often that if you want to know the kind of the electorate, you just see the kind of leader they elected. When you look at that one, you can tell or guess what the people who elected him look like, or what were the benchmarks they were looking at. Then number two, it is the role of us citizens to remain informed. That's why I was saying that it is important as people in the civic space to keep fighting for these rights, because it is our responsibility to inform our people who are not informed. A citizen who is not informed cannot make the right choice, because information will lead you to making, and the NRM is smart at that, to keep people not informed so that they are not able to use their discernment very well. But I also argue it is our responsibility to respect the law, to work within the confines of the law. But if we don't, then we will not have whatever we need. That's why even the electoral reforms we are talking about, then we will not enjoy them. And that's where the movement needs us to remain in that confusion, because they themselves, they don't respect the law. You have seen police cars and so on failing supporters of movement. That shows they are partisan, and yet they are supposed to be neutral and so on. Then we need to hold the officials that we elect accountable. Like, for example, you hear the UPDF, Uganda People's Defense Forces, but is it answerable to the people of Uganda? That is a discussion for another day. Then we should constantly advocate. Like, here what we are doing, we are advocating. We should have these discussions openly, not tear gassing people who are discussing. But then we should also learn the idea of signing petitions locally. Internationally, we have seen it work. They say we need somebody sanctioned, and then works. And then why is our participation important? Because we have the right to penalize politicians as the local. That is the tool that our people should know. Don't vote them again. We have all that right. So why is it important? Because we have said our voices can influence what we need as citizens. The moment we voice them properly, then we can have what we call self-governance. The person knows that your vote is not going to be bought just a sack of salt. Now, when it comes back to my candidate, I don't think there is nobody who is not aware that Mugisha Muntu is one of the sober people that we have in the country. And therefore, when you look at values and what he stands for, incorruptible, a man who stands on to his words. And if I can quote the words he has always said, that any leader, you cannot give what you don't have. If you don't have integrity, if you are corrupt, if you are not trustworthy, if you are violent, if you are not a good listener, if you are not patriotic, you can't promise by mere words that you are going to be patriotic, that you are going to lead people or transform country. So I still believe that it is important. And then we have our population has been hoodwinked. Instead of listening to the message that a candidate have, they just have slogans that are taking nowhere the country. And people, we keep on slogans and so on. But it would be important. Again, it comes back to what I said. Our electorates, we still lack civic education, so that they know when you go to a rally, do you have your checklist? Like I normally see here in the US, a voter has a checklist. Is he talking about my economy? Is he talking about how taxes will be reduced? Is he talking about this? Because they know what these politicians are going to do equally affects them directly, but which is lacking back home. And it's what Mugisha Muntu has been trying to do. That look here, we don't need the politics of shouting and making noise, politics of failing people. As ANT, we don't fail people for a campaign rally. We find the people there and we talk and engage them and even allow them to ask questions. So that's our engagement. That's how you understand the community. That's how you understand what they need, and that's how we can take a country forward. But if we just say you come, you just talk whatever you need to talk, shout, and then go away, give them a few T-shirts and food like what the NRM does, for sure we still have a long way to go. But I urge you, all Ugandans, that it is important they look at Mugisha Muntu as a person who is sober. He has ever held offices of responsibility, and he was never greedy. He doesn't have any scandal of corruption, any scandal of embezzlement. He's a human and worth a leader to give an opportunity to lead this country. And we see some of these reforms that we need during the ANT regime. Ugandans give it a mandate. You will see all these democratic changes take effect, and we move Uganda forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. I guess I will continue. Yeah, Francis, just to add on some of your submissions, I do concur with you that General Mugisha Muntu is a credible gentleman. As I had his submissions during the debate, he made very compelling submissions and arguments on various subjects like the economy, security, human rights, which I think that is very compelling. What I would wish to see is that I would like to see that there's more cooperation and coordination with other like-minded allies out there. I know that they're working with I think PPF, which is a good sign, but I would love to see them expand that horizon to embrace in bring on board more stakeholders. In that way, would be a very good front to check on the status quo. I also do like to supplement on your submissions about electoral reforms. We need to make sure that institutions like the judiciary, the police, the army are for the people of Uganda, but not to serve interest of individuals. So those are areas that we need to make sure that they're addressed so that in the future we have more credible, electoral processes. And also, just to summarize, I think we all know that this is a global revolution. The current digital technology, has transformed the electoral processes across the world. There's no overstatement about this. There are multiple reports and examples that have been shown, outsized the role of digital communication on social media. So I believe that Uganda is no exception. The social media will play a very big role, as a check platform to ensure that there's transparency, accountability, and fairness in the elections. Yeah, I think that would be very important. You cannot ignore that part. And finally, I also want to just, to make a general conclusion about election observers and election monitors. The two are all very important, subsets of electoral partners, but they have different, roles they do play. As you're aware that the monitors have more extensive mandate than the observers. They're allowing them to take action if their issues have been observed during the electoral process. So in summary, both election observers and monitors collect information about elections, and monitors have a greater role or level of authority to intervene in the process of electoral processes if necessary, whereas observers primarily focus on collecting data without interfering directly. So thank you for that. Yeah.
My apologies, I dropped off. Technology sometimes can really betray us.
Yes.
But I must appreciate you, my panelists, Dr. Alfredo Chen and Francis Komuhanda, for your able participation on today's edition of the Uganda Diaspora Show. Of course, it's always a pleasure to listen to you and pick some of the key insights and perspectives, and for the benefit of the wider Ugandan citizenry. We'll see you next time. Be blessed. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Thank you. You
Wonderful
too.
weekend too, and stay safe.